Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, I want to show another DIY project. This will be two-part dosing containers with an integrated float switch to notify of a low-level situation. Stay tuned. Before we get started, I just want to show the current dosing containers that I have hooked up on my system. I have two 1-gallon jugs with my alkalinity and calcium in there, hooked up to my bulk Reef supply dosing pumps. These work fine. It's basically a container, holds the solution. The shortcoming is, it's really kind of hard to tell how much solution is actually left in here. I have to come in and manually check. No big deal. But if I do run out, the only way I'm going to know is by coming down here to check. There's no system in place to notify me when the levels get low. And since I do have an Apex aquarium controller, I could do better. So that's what we'll be working on today. The first thing we're going to need, obviously, is a container to hold the solution. I opted to go with these 1-gallon glass jars that I got off of Amazon. They have a plastic lid, wide mouth, and I think these will work pretty good. After I started on the project, I realized I could have, also just used an empty 1-gallon container that I have from bulk Reef supply. I could have peeled the label off, and this would have worked just as well. So that's a tip if you want to save a few dollars. You could use one of those containers as well. But I opted for the glass jar. So the first thing I did when I got my jar is I took my 100 milliliter beaker and I started filling it up. And I marked off every 500 milliliters on here just so I have an idea of how much solution is left in there. I just used some red electrical tape to put the marks on there. And I labeled my container alkalinity and the other one is calcium with a label maker. Some of the other equipment we're going to need, obviously the Apex aquarium controller, and I'm using the Neptune Systems Breakout Box so I could hook up some float switches to the system. So we need the Breakout Box. We're going to need some wire. I'm just using some old speaker wire that I had laying around, which will work just fine. And then this is the one that I've already completed. And I can show you we're going to need a float switch. We're going to need some 1/4-inch acrylic tubing. And I used some scrap acrylic sheet that I had laying around to fashion some brackets. And then probably the last thing, I needed some rubber grommets to hold my tubing in place. And just some tools to make this all get put together. The first thing we'll start with is the acrylic tubing. I cut off one piece. It's approximately 10 inches long. This is going to be the tube that we're going to mount our float switch to. The other thing we're going to need is to make a small mounting bracket out of our acrylic sheet. Like I said, I had some spare acrylic sheet laying around, so I cut out a little rectangle. This is about an 1.5 inches by 1 inch wide. Doesn't really matter. You don't have to be too accurate with it. And then I, cut that out, and then I've drilled a few holes into it. So I've got a 3/8 inch hole and a 1/4 inch hole drilled into here. Depending on your float switch, you may need to vary that. But so all I'm going to do is go ahead and mount my float switch to this bracket. And they come with this washer and nut to secure it in place. Okay, so I got my float switch mounted to the bracket, and then I'm going to take my acrylic tubing and insert that into the other hole here. and it's a pretty snug fit, so it fits right in there. It's not going anywhere. If it were loose, I could put some glue on there to keep it in place, but I think it'll be fine, just press fit into there. And then what I'm going to do is take the wires and I'm going to run them up through the tube. And this will allow them to come up through the top of the container and hook into the breakout box. I do have this other bracket here, which I'm also going to put onto this tubing. And this will just be a way to hold the other tube, which is going to be the feed tube, which the solution will be coming through, together with this one. I'll keep them nice and straight, I think. So I can just put that one on here for now. We'll be using this a little bit later. In order to get the tubing and wiring through the lid, I'm going to need to drill 2 holes. So here's my container here. I've got a 3/8 inch drill bit, which I'm going to go ahead and put a couple holes in here. Okay, so I've got my holes there. Let me clean them up. And then we'll be able to put some grommets in there to hold our tubing in place. For the rubber grommets, I just have a variety pack here. And the ones I'll be using are these 3/8 inch rubber grommets. And these will fill in the hole and leave a nice way for these tubes to enter into the lid. Keeps it nice and secure. And these things just fill in the holes here. You do need to work it in there. Sometimes they're a little bit of a pain to get into place. But once they're in there, it should be nice and secure. So I'm going to go ahead and get this one in there now, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step, which will be wiring up the extension to the float switch so we can have a 4-foot lead on there, so it'll give me some room to plug it, or some more length, so I could run the wires where I need to underneath of my sump. Since the wire leads on the float switch are so short, we need to go ahead and solder on an extension wire. So I've got a 4-foot length of cable here, and I'm just going to finish up this. I need to solder the other one. I've already got the first wire done, and so we can make a nice solid connection here. And now that I think of it, and I may go back and do this later, might be worthwhile to put a quick connect on here, so in case I needed to take this apart, it'd be easy to do so. That's something to think about. And then looks like that's a good connection. Got my heat shrink tubing there. Just go ahead and heat this up. I'll keep that all nice and tidy. And we're ready to move on to the next step. We're just about done with the construction and time to start putting things together. So we've got our container with the levels marked off. We've done our lid with the holes and the grommets. We've put together our float switch on its mounting bracket. And we've done the wiring extension for this. So I'm going to go ahead and just feed this wire through this middle hole here. And then we're going to feed the tube right on up through the grommet. And we can play around with this height, but this will be going into here. We're just about ready to do the final testing on this and final installation. So what I've done is I've taken the breakout box and I've got it plugged into the I/O port on the Apex up here. And then we had to connect our float switches into the breakout box. So each float switch has 2 wires. One will be going to the ground pin. And then a breakout box can support up to 6 switches. So I have my calcium on switch 1 and alkalinities on switch 2. Again, it's always important to label all your wires. Your future self will thank you. So I would recommend doing that. So all the electrical connections are in place. we can see we got our floats here. The float valves have two positions, obviously, open and closed. The way these are set up is while the float is up, this is in the closed position, and when it drops down, it'll be in the open position. You can reverse that by taking that little clip off, and you can flip the float around. I think it's better to do it this way, and I can get into that in just a minute. But so all the electrical connections are done. Let's just set up the alerts on the Apex. So right here I have the two switches set up, and you can see they're both detected as being closed. And if I come into here, you can give them a name. So I've named this one calcium switch, and it tells me that that's on I1. And the second switch, obviously I named it ALK switch, and that's on I2. So to set up the alerts, we simply come down to the email outlet, and I'm going to go ahead and I've already got the calcium alert in there. So to put in the alert for the alkalinity switch, it's quite simple. We're just going to do if ALK switch is open, which means the float will be in a down position, then on. So the alert will be active if the alkalinity switch is in the open position or down. And I'll just go ahead, save that. And our alert, it's that easy to set it up. The reason why I recommend having it in the working off of the closed position and being alerted if it's open, it's more of a fail-safe. If for any reason one of these switches becomes disconnected, the Apex defaults it to open. So I would get an alert immediately if it lost connection with one of my switches, notifying me to come check this out, so I'll know something's wrong. If I had it set to always open and waiting for the closed position, the alert would never trigger because it would never hit the closed position if it became disconnected. So that's just like a little tip. So let's go ahead and give this an actual test. Before I hook it into my actual containers, I've got these tubes will be, these acrylic rods will be going into each one of these spots right there. But we can go ahead and test this with water, and you can see in real time how quickly these alerts come into us. So I've just started a siphon, siphoning out the water from the jar into a bucket. And as this drops down, we'll see as soon as that float switch hits the open position or down, I should get an alert on my iPhone. So I'll probably just fast forward this because it'll take a few seconds, and then we'll see how it comes across on the phone. And there we have it. The float has just hit the open position or down, just under 1 liter. And I got my alert immediately on the cell phone, so it's working. I'm going to go ahead and stop the siphon. And I've already tested on the calcium switch. I know that one is set up and working. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get this connected in with in the actual spot that it's going to be. And I think this is going to help out a lot. At least it'll give me, a few days notice. I probably go through half a liter every 2 days. So this will give me, quite a few days notice that I need to come in and fill these containers back up. So I'll just give you a final view of what it looks like in the final place where it's installed. So I've got it down here in the sump area where the other 1 gallon containers were. So I got my 2 glass jars right there. I've got the Breakout Box mounted right there and connected into the Apex. So I think this is going to be a good addition. I can basically control when the alert will come. I could slide this tube up and down, so the further down it goes, the lower The solution will be in the container before the alert goes off, or if I want to be alerted earlier, I can always bring the tube up, which will raise the float up a little bit higher. But right now it's set to about 1 liter, which will give me about 4 to 5 days notice before this container will be empty. So I think that's sufficient. And yeah, so hopefully you guys found this informative or entertaining. If you did, please let me know in the comments. If you have any ideas of how I can improve this, please let me know. And I hope you hit the subscribe button, and look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.